Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. That is Xan, I am Shoob, and today we are back. And Xan, the dog days of summer have finally come upon us, and you know what that means. It's win total season, baby. The time
it's still the off season. It's still the off season, but it's not off season for us. Our season starts a little bit early, and that starts today, baby. It's time to do a deep dive, jump into all this madness that is the world of college football that is ever evolving in front of us, and the transfer portal, now that it is just completely out of control as it's been getting the last couple of years. But now, Shoob, now I kind of just wait. I sit on my hands for a couple months. I don't know how you approach it. I just sit on my hands for a couple months, and then I wait for the dust to settle before I even just go, who went where? Oh, because this is too much, man. But now that we're here, it's time to do a deep dive and see how this is all going to shake out.
That's the way you have to do it these days in this age of college football. But with that being said, we got a little bit of a new format here for you guys this year with win totals. We're going to break these videos up. We're going to break these videos by conference. We're going to start with the ACC. Then we're going to do the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC. But this year, we're going to break each conference into 3 separate episodes because, you know, in today's age of the Power Four, these conferences are massive and there's just way too many teams now. So doing a whole episode with like 16 or 17, 18 teams per conference would just be a lot. That would be a drag. So each video, we're going to break it up into conglomerates of 6 teams each. And, you know, sort of have some rhyme or reason behind it, which teams. But we're going to start with the ACC former Atlantic Division teams. So divisions, they no longer exist, but we're going to cover the former Atlantic Division teams, minus Syracuse, because they don't count. But anyways, Sam, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's take a look here at the board. So one other quick new thing that we are adding this year for over-under win total predictions is we're going to assign confidence points, and it's pretty straightforward. You see on the key, 1 point for low confidence in a play, 2 for medium confidence, and 3 points for high confidence. And at the end of the year, whether we're right or wrong, we're going to tally these points, plus or minus each of those confidence points, and see where we fall. It's another grading or scoring criteria, I should say, for how we do this year. So that way it gives the viewer, yourself, and myself a better idea of where we actually really stand with these picks, because you know how it goes, man. And for those of you who've been around, sometimes you're fence riding. So let's get into it, man. Let's not waste any more time. We got a lot to cover per usual. Let's start off with the Boston College Eagles, going in alphabetical order here between these 6 teams. The Eagles come in with a line of 4.5 wins. We're going to be using Caesars Sportsbook as of today. Today's recording date is June 23rd. And Caesars has got an over-under. The juice on the over is to minus 160, so lean over there at 4.5. Bill O'Brien's coming in for his first year as head coach at Boston College. Welcome back to the college game, Bill O'Brien. Xan, what's your read on the BC Eagles in the Bill O'Brien era?
You know, the BC Eagles are really interesting, Shoob. I you know, last year I didn't really think much of them, and I was looking over at their roster this year thinking, oh God, Bill O'Brien, the guy, you know, who traded away DeAndre Hopkins for pennies on the dollar amid a bunch of other crazy moves in his tenure in the NFL. But this is college, and we have to, like, let's just go back to this. He's a good coach. There's a reason people keep hiring him in these circles, and I think he may just be the guy at a school like Boston College that might be able to help this school in this particular tier thrive, because you need a noteworthy name in order to drive people to come play for you. And they've done that. And I noticed that in their transfer portal. And so first off, before we dive into that, offense, 46th last year in offensive efficiency, schedule adjusted offensive efficiency, which actually surprised me, Shoob. I did not think that they were that good on offense. However, their downside was their defense being at 110th, which obviously if your defense is sub 100, you are going to lose a lot of football games. So Tommy Castellanos, I think, is going to be the pivot point of how they do this season. Oh, the quarterback. Oh, yeah, Shoob. Xan, very revolutionary. The quarterback is going to determine how their season goes. Amazing. Here's what I mean by that. Castellanos threw 15 touchdowns last year and 14 interceptions. You know how I am about ratios.
You love your touchdown interception ratios.
I love those ratios, baby, because opportunities. That's an opportunity ratio to me. And if you're going 1-1, you're not going to win a lot of football games. Look, Castellanos did a lot with his legs. Amazing. But if Castellanos can do what he did last year and just throw a few less interceptions, get that ratio to 2-1, they could be looking at the over, potentially. Potentially. Now, I will say this. They return Rai Robichaux, who basically had close to 800 yards and 8 touchdowns rushing on almost 5 yards a carry. And then they also added Trayshawn Ward, which is kind of a quiet ad, but I actually really like that ad. Very quiet because many people expected him to tear it up at K-State when he transferred from Florida State over to the Wildcats, but he didn't really do much there. In fact, his production was comparable to what it was at Florida State. But I think he's going to be a good 1-2 punch in this offense. And I think Bill O'Brien's going to make very good use of him. So I actually really, really like that. There's very good depth at the running back position for a team like Boston College. They returned their lead wide receiver in Lewis Bond, who had 646 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. And then a quiet ad, Shoob, for people who watch Big 12 football, Jerand Bradley. Now, he had a down year, but he did come from Texas Tech, and he has shown, signs in certain games that he can be imposing. He can really impose himself on his opponents. Now, his stats have teetered and tottered, but he has shown that he could be a good player when it matters. So I'm curious to see what he does then. And then they added Jade McGowan from Vandy, which we'll see how that one works out. I mean, it's a Vandy receiver. But ultimately, Shoob, that's a lot more ads than I was expecting for Bill O'Brien. And then, of course, we have to talk about he bringing in Will Lawling as OC, from the New England Patriots, being the tight end coach over there. That's NFL experience. And so his tree, I will say Bill O'Brien's tree, may help with the development of some of these young guys. NFL guys with a lot of experience. I'm curious to see how this is going to work out. They brought in one thing really interesting, Shoob, while we're still on coordinators. Tim Lewis, their new defensive coordinator. He has NFL experience, Shoob, but you know where he's been the last 5 years? I know you know, actually. Where's he been, Shoob?
Oh, I'm aware. He's been in the XFL, not the NFL, my guy.
Yeah, he's been in the XFL.
What was it, the Washington Renegades or whatever the hell those teams are? I was going
to
write them down.
He was on a few different teams.
Yeah, he was on
a few
different
teams in the XFL. I don't know if he got fired or if he just jumped or what's going on, but
that's a hell of a jump, I will say, to go from the XFL to the OC at Boston College in the Power Four.
And then you must be doing something right. And you were coaching in the NFL prior to that. So, what's going on? I can't tell if you're a good coach or not. Only time will tell, But anyway, man, to the offensive line. Hey, man, they return 3 starters, but they lose their best O-lineman and Christian Mahogany. He's gone, no longer there. And I will say, last year, my biggest bugaboo for them was O-line. No. Boston College O-line's going to be terrible. They surprised. They were better than expected. Good job, Boston College. Now, I think the offense overall will be improved from what it was last year. To say this shortly, make a long story short. Defense, I'll make this faster. Look, man, they lost their only NFL prospect in Elijah Jones. He's a 3rd-round pick, man. 3rd-round pick, and he graded excellent on PFF, great coverage guy. You can't lose a guy like that and not take a step back, especially when you lose your other starter on the other end who graduated. So now you've lost 2 key starters on the outside, and yeah, you're bringing in a transfer, but it's not a guy who graded out very well. He's from Georgia State. Transfer portal rating's not very high either. You're definitely taking a step back. Now, I will say they do return both of their safeties, so that's a plus, and they're also bringing in a former 4-star from Ohio State, Cam Martinez. So I like to think that these guys have athleticism, and they just need to go to a lower level to shine. This could be an opportunity to maybe get a diamond in the rough there and develop him and maybe have a good little tandem of safeties. But on the outside, man, they're going to be in a world of hurt. And they do bring a lot of experience back on the D-line, but I still don't think it's going to be too formidable. They did add some depth in the transfer portal, and they're going to have a decent rotation there. But ultimately, man, Boston College, I think they have the potential to be a very middle of the pack team, but the schedule is what determines these lines, man. They have to go at FSU to open the year. That's more than likely going to be a loss. Then they get to play Duquesne. That's a win. They go at Mizzou, man. That is tough. Your first 3 weeks, you got to go at FSU and at Mizzou. That's a loss, man. Michigan State under the new, Jonathan Smith regime, they've got more talent than you. That's probably a loss. Western Kentucky, a probable they can maybe win that one, but Western Kentucky, those Hilltoppers like to throw the ball. They like to score, man. So you never know how that one's going to shake out. Especially if your secondary, your corners are inexperienced and don't know how to deal with the air game, man. Whew, could get rough. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Virginia Tech, who, by the way, is pretty sneaky this year. Shoob, can't wait to talk about Virginia Tech because,
Agreed.
hey, I was on them last year, and I think they're actually going to take a little bit of a step this year. Wink, wink, giving away some of my picks for the future.
A little
But
foreshadowing.
and then they go off to Louisville, probably a loss. Another bye week. Syracuse, a probable. At SMU, probably a loss. UNC, probably a loss. And then they play Pitt, which is a probable. So overall, man, it's rough, man, because I look at all of these probables here, and I see what Boston College is sitting here at a line of what, 4.5. You know what, Shoob? Give me 5. I'll go over.
Give him 5. He's going over. All
I'll
right.
go over, man. Look, I think this is a very adequate line. I think it's very well pegged by the sports books. I think 4 to 5 is very fair. And that's why I'm going to give it a confidence rating of 1 because I can see it teetering any way. A lot of these probables, like Syracuse, Virginia, those are going to decide this win total. So,
Yeah, very good points all around, man. I'm kind of have the same assessment on this team in Boston College. So to me, what really boils down to is it's obviously Thomas Castellanos. I mean, and the coaching staff. It's a brand new staff, new coordinators, new head coach. And I know Bill O'Brien was the head coach of Penn State all the way back in 2012 for a couple of years, but that was more than a decade ago, man. I mean, Bill O'Brien's been out of the college game, at least as a head coach, and for over a decade. It's a completely new era. Even when he was the OC at Alabama back when they had Bryce Young, not that long ago, things have changed a lot since then, and the landscape of the sport has just changed so much. So I'm not really sure. It's hard to tell how Bill O'Brien is going to be at Boston College, but I think when we did this coaching grade hire, I'm pretty sure I gave it a B plus, you gave it like a B minus, something around there. I think we both thought it was overall average to above average, solid
for a
hire, I
school like
think.
Boston College, I think it's a good hire. Just you got to
Yeah.
get a big name guy. How else are you going to stick out in the pack, especially right now?
Exactly. And these are my key takeaways here. Offensively, it's how will Thomas Castellanos adjust to the new coaching staff? They're going to run a multiple pro scheme. That's a little bit of a change from last year under Halfley. And can he improve as a passer? I mean, that's the biggest question here. If Boston College is going to get to a bowl game, it'll be because Thomas Castellanos improved as a passer. Because we know he's a great rusher. He was the seventh best graded rusher in all of FBS last year as a quarterback. But passing wise, not so much. No bueno. And as the defense, I'm looking at the defense right here. Obviously, a big question at defensive coordinator Tim Lewis. I mean, you said it yourself, man. We can't even tell if he's a good coach or not, man. You've been in the XFL the last few
And
years. Like,
multiple teams in the
yeah.
XFL, man. He's been getting recycled.
I mean, I will say it was kind of nice to start this off as the first team and be like, man, the first team we have, new coaching staff, and these guys are like coming from the XFL. Like, how are we supposed to judge this team here? But bottom line is Tim Lewis, he's never coordinated at the FBS or NFL level. He's never coordinated in any major pro level. So, to put it lightly. So, it's a big question mark. Now, as far as the schedule, I have a new model that I am introducing for myself this year. It's called the Shoob model. Now, the Shoob model spits out a win total, and the Shoob model is going to be used to drive a lot of my decisions. Now, I occasionally will override what the model says.
You've always regretted it.
Sometimes I regret it. Sometimes, I feel like maybe my intuition gets the best of me. But the Shoob model is down on Boston College. And I hate this because they're the first team, but this is like one of the biggest discrepancies I feel like of the teams today is BC. The Shoob model only has Boston College projected for 3.2 wins this year. So that's pretty low. So the model is screaming at me that this is a big underplay. And I think the biggest driver behind that is the coaching staff because the coaching staff got a big downgrade in that column. And I think that's what's driving this. I don't think they're going to be that bad. The only game I have them favored in is against Duquesne, which is their FBS opponent, and then their non-conference, as you've already highlighted, is pretty tough. I mean, I could see them going 2-2, best case scenario, maybe 1-3. I don't have them favored against Western Kentucky, which I don't know if I agree with that just yet, but the model does not like them versus Western Kentucky. So in my
Hey, as I
opinion,
was saying, man, there's secondary. West Kentucky, those Hilltoppers like to throw it, man.
exactly. And I think the best case scenario, very best case scenario, is 6 or 7 wins. You get to a bowl game. I will say though, I do think that having North Carolina and Pitt at home late in the season is actually a good thing for Boston College because those are two teams with head coaches that are either on the hot seat or potentially could be leaving or retiring from college football at the end of the year. And they get both of them at home to end the year. And that's quit alert season late in November. That's big time quit alert season, and that can be used to Boston College's advantage here if best case scenario were to happen. So just keep an eye out on that. But with all that being said, the model's screaming at me to take an under here, but I'm kind of with you, man. I think 4 to 5 wins is probably most likely. I'm gonna go under 4.5, but with low confidence. So I'm gonna say that BC goes a nice crisp 4-8 to begin the Bill O'Brien tenure, and that's going to be a low confidence point for me. So 1 point in that column. So already we got a disagreement, but we're both not confident in it. So what a better way to start out win totals, man.
Hey, I think it's very fair to go under on BC because I mean, truly, I mean, a whole new coaching staff and everything. It's really hard to understand how this team's going to perform, and not to mention the new ACC as a whole. So it'll
Yeah.
be really interesting this year, Shub. But let's move on, Shub. Let's move on to a team who we all expected to really get back on the high horse last year, especially after hiring Garrett Riley. We thought this team might take off offensively, combined with elite defense, and one particular head coach's refusal to adapt to the times, taking in zero transfers from the transfer portal. Zero transfers. Shoo, I'm talking about the Clemson Tigers. What do you got on them?
Clemson, 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 man. Yeah, everybody's got an opinion on Dabo right now, and I feel like everyone's pretty stuck on whatever their opinion is. Either you think that he's a dinosaur, he needs to adapt, or you think, hey, I want Dabo to shove it up there, you know what, and win 10 games or maybe make the playoff and do it with his own guys, not using the transfer portal. But anyways, Clemson went 9-4 last year, obviously notorious. They went 4-4 in ACC play last year. 4-4. Like that's Wake Forest territory. That's Syracuse territory. That's not Clemson territory. I will say I think they were a little bit better than their record showed, to be fair. Offensively, they have 8 out of 11 starters returning. This was the Achilles heel last year for the Tigers, 63rd in offensive efficiency. Quarterback Cade Klubnik, he looks to take a big step forward this year. The former 5-star recruit, he struggled mightily under pressure last year versus when he was kept clean. Those are big splits that really stood out to me when looking at under the hood. But I think that there are reasons for optimism here. And here's why. His grades improved on medium to range passes last year. He was tied for fifth, having the most drops from his receivers last year. So Klubnik did not, in his defense, he did not have help from his receivers. Clemson's receiver core has not been good, and they didn't do their quarterback any favors. So you think just by default, Clemson's receivers have to be a little bit better than that. And this is the second year with offensive coordinator Garrett Riley, as you mentioned. I mean, that continuity, it didn't go so well last year, but having that continuity, having that extra year with your OC, it usually means good things more often than not. So I see reasons for optimism here, but I wouldn't expect the Heisman campaign to break out for Klubnik, to put it lightly. So a little give or take there. As far as receiving, this is where the big question is, man. Will Shipley grade out as their best receiver last year, which is a problem. When you're running back is the greatest out as your best receiver, that's not good. They need guys like Tyler Brown and Antonio Williams to step up. Those were their best graded quality players last year outside of Shipley. Goes without saying, if those two guys can step up, take a step forward, Clemson gets an alpha wide receiver one, it will help out Klubnik a lot. As far as rushing wise, Phil Maffa returns as a good rushing back, but he did receive poor receiving and blocking grades. And then offensive line, I'd say that Blake Miller at right tackle graded out as the best of the bunch there along the line up front. And then defensively, only 2 starters returned from last year, man. They were top five last year in total defensive efficiency. They were number 4. They had 5 players drafted off this defense. And if you're a Clemson fan, you're just kind of
You're
kicking
used to it.
yourself like you're used to it, but you're like, man, we're wasting these great defenses, man. If our offense were just half as good, we'd be probably winning the ACC and making the playoff. Iowa problems just on a bigger scale. But that being said, they have three starters off the defensive line drafted, but Peter Woods and Peyton Page are stars on the rise, in my opinion. I feel like they
Peter Woods is
will,
really good.
yeah,
Peter Woods
Peter
is really good.
Woods.
He's going to be in the NFL. He's really good.
I think that the defensive line quality will not drop off a ton. At linebacker, you're losing Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to the NFL. That's a huge loss, but you return Barrett Carter. Kobe McLeod was also a solid player as well. So I do think that they're returning good quality players that can fill in the shoes a little bit. And then the secondary, I think overall the drop off won't be too bad there in the back end. So overall, defensive wise, I think that it will not finish top five again, but I still think this defense can finish top 10, maybe top 20 overall. So not too big of a drop off. And as far as the offense, my main takeaway, man, going back to it is I think there's room for optimism with Garrett Riley and Klubnik, and the receivers just need to improve on their drops, man. That's the bottom line. Looking at the schedule here, the Shoob model has Clemson at 8 wins on the dot. So the line is sitting at 9 even. The Shoob model has them only at 8. So that's a little bit of an underplay for me. Now, really, when you look at the schedule, though, and you break it down, I think that the model is maybe a little bit too higher on certain teams here. For instance, I have Clemson as a little bit of an underdog at Virginia Tech. So that just
I
goes to
don't know
show
about all that, Shoob.
the model is pretty high on Virginia Tech, man. The model is high on the Hokies.
I like the Hokies too, man. We talked about that in the last segment, but man, you like the Hokies a little too much, Shoob.
It's the model that likes the Hokies, man, not me. But, well, actually, I do, but I don't fully agree with the model here. But it also has Florida State as a very, very, very slight favorite over Clemson, pretty much a toss up there. And then you have games against like NC State that they have at home. They have Louisville at home. I think those are games, South Carolina at home. I think those are games that Clemson, you could characterize them maybe as toss-ups or games that they could be at risk of losing if those were away, but they have a lot of those teams at home, which I think is a good thing for them this year. So, with all that being said, I think the biggest takeaway here for Clemson, man, just looking at this schedule, the best case scenario is Klubnik in the offense emerge, and I think that the team best case scenario can go 11-1 because that first game against Georgia, they're not going to win that game. I have them as a 7% chance of winning that game. So I'm just kind of writing that off as an L. But if they do lose to Georgia, even with that loss in the bank against Georgia in the opening week, I think that there is a path for them to get to 10 wins, even with a loss to Georgia. And I think the upside is there. But the thing is, man, the ACC overall is looking a bit better this year, especially at the top of the conference. I think this is going to be the best year the ACC will have in a while. It's been a while since the ACC has been good at the top, but I think this year there's a handful of teams that can compete for the conference. And if Clemson does not improve at all, especially offensively, they're susceptible to 4 or 5 losses on the schedule, man. I could see them having another 8-4, 7-5 year if nothing improves. It's on the table. But with that being said, man, I'm gonna go low confidence here, but I'm gonna say under 9 wins. So again, low confidence. I like that it's the line is at 9 even because that gives us some push insurance either way. But I'm not comfortable going over here, though I do see a path for it. I'm gonna say lean under with 1 confidence point.
You know, Shoob, when I initially did this, I actually did go under. And then I sat there and I pondered this. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? For all the things that you mentioned, Klubnik will be back, continuity in the system. And then I think, look, I think some of their true freshman wide receivers are going to end up getting seeing a lot of playing time and may end up being the starters by game 3 or 4. And I'm talking about Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. I mean, TJ Moore was a 5-star recruit. He's a true freshman. Wesco is also a true freshman, and he was almost a 5-star recruit as well. And those are guys who are definitely going to see the field. The guys who were ahead of them don't have a lot of production to their names, not a lot of experience. So I'm thinking if push comes to shove, we are definitely going to see those guys get thrown into the mix. If Klubnik, you were mentioned Klubnik, not performing well because of receivers not really giving him a lot of help. Well, now he's got 2 big bad boy receivers that he can work with. So I think there's potential to see Klubnik improve in that capacity. So I'm definitely in on Klubnik improving a little bit this season, and 4 out of 5 offensive line starters returning. I'm definitely enjoying the upside that I see with Clemson. So I do think that there is the potential for them to surprise some people. What you mentioned about their defense and all that they lost in defense is absolutely true. But man, they still got studs, man. And look, I know that Dabo's stubborn and doesn't like to go to the portal, but they still recruit some pretty dang good players, and they've still got some pretty good players in the woodshed over there. So they're still going to be one of the teams to beat in the ACC. Now, it's not the Clemson that we've known from the past. No, this isn't going to be your Deshaun Watson Clemson. No, this isn't the powerhouse that you just are hoping that they can. Any ACC team can maybe beat them one time, because we fully expect them to lose at least once. Let's be real. But I think we have to look at the schedule, Shub, and I look at the schedule, and it's going to sound a little contradictory to what I just said at first, because I think it's very realistic that Clemson can start the season 1-2. And I mean, starting with a loss to Georgia, a win against App State, losing to NC State. I think that is very, very possible that they lose to NC State this year. NC State has a very good team this year, like even better than they were last year. I'm very high in the Wolfpack. Hint, hint. Um, but then they got to play Stanford, who I think is a little bit sneaky. I think they'll win that, and then you go at Florida State. That's going to be a toss-up. Now, look, if you lose that Florida State game, boom, you're already sitting there at 3 losses. But then, as you mentioned, Shub, a lot of your more tricky games like South Carolina and Louisville are at home. This NC State game is at home. More often than not, you're going to at least win those games. Typically speaking, you're probably going to win 2 of 3 of those games when you have the home field advantage. So that's what makes me think that 9-3 is probably very likely for Clemson, because I can totally see them losing or even starting 1-2. If they started 1-2, as long as it wasn't like getting blown out, I still wouldn't waver from a 9-3 pick. I can totally see it. Now, I think it's more likely that they go 9-3 or find a way to go 10-2 than it is that they go 8-4. And that's why I'm going to teeter to the over on this. But like you, Shub, I'm going to assign it 1 confidence point, because I can totally see this going the other way. As I mentioned, they could start 1-2, would not surprise me. But then we talked about how we're higher in Virginia Tech. We talked about how they got to go at Florida State. They got to play South Carolina, and that game has not been a gimme here in recent years. So, I mean, it can get nasty really quickly. It's going to be entirely up to the development of Cade Klubnik, and see if any of those true freshman wide receivers step up, or some of the receivers they already have on the roster, Shub. So I'm with you, man, but I can't wait to talk about some of these other teams that we mentioned on this schedule. But I will say, like, it's hard to pick this one. It is.
Yeah. I think we're both in agreement. 9-3 is the most likely outcome. I think we're both in agreement on that. We just kind of lean 2 different directions, but we're both agreement 9 wins is nice. And I feel like we may be we may come out of this one at the end of the year with some push insurance. That's all I'm going to say, because this seems about right on the dot to me. But yeah, I will say it is nice for Clemson that, keep in mind, and this goes for every team this year when we're covering win totals. It's the way that the calendar works this year, but every team is 2 bye weeks this year. It's just the way that the calendar works. And so those 2 byes that Clemson has are both before they play Louisville and before they play NC State. And I think that's a big advantage.
Those are huge.
Exactly.
And they're at home for both.
And those are games. 2 of those critical opponents that if they win those games, they're probably on the right side of this win total. And hey, I mean, if you're a Clemson fan, man, like, I think you're just saying to yourself, like, hey, like, I'm not expecting to beat Georgia. Like, I just want to see some improvement. I think it's pretty much like a guarantee that the offense takes a step forward. Like, the offense has to be better this year. It just has to. There's no way they cannot. There's no way.
Just don't let Georgia run you out of the stadium.
Exactly.
Look at, like, lose by, if you're going to lose by a couple scores. Don't lose by 4 or 5 scores. Show that you have improved a little bit.
And you can still make the playoff and win the ACC even if you get smoked by UGA in the first week. It's totally possible for that to happen. But
UGA smokes a lot of people, so.
Exactly. All right. Well, they're arch rivals. They're counterparts down in Tallahassee. How about Florida State, man? The Noles. Man, Florida State coming off of last season. They went through the ringer, man. They had a 13-0 regular season, won the ACC championship, and then they got snubbed from making the playoff at the hands of 12-1 Alabama, who got put in as the SEC champion in the fourth spot last year. We all know what happened. And then Florida State proceeded to just lay the guard down and got smoked by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. And now Florida State has a lot of turnover going into this year. They're sitting with a win total of 9.5 wins. Mike Norvell, per usual, has done a lot of work in the transfer portal. Florida State has been transfer portal kings in the very early years of the portal. Norvell has seemed to figure it out and use it very well. And that's why this win total is up where it is. So the sports books are saying, hey, maybe not a whole lot of drop off here. We got even juice on this line. So 115 either side at 9.5 wins for the Noles. Xan, what do you see for Mike Norvell and Florida State in his fifth season there? Can you believe it's his fifth season already at Florida State?
He's doing a great job, man. Doing a great job. Um, I'll say this is one like FSU, or sorry, like Clemson. I teetered on this one because I see that FSU Clemson game as a potential breaking point for both of these lines, um, and so that really scares me. So when going through this, I even looked at week one. I said Georgia Tech, the season opener. That seems a little trappy to me. We've got
Oh
like
yeah.
DJU, new quarterback in town. We've got Roydell Williams, new running back in town, with a true freshman. I think his name's
Yep.
Cam Davis. Yeah, his name's
Yep.
Cam Davis. And then you've got Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson out the door. Jaheim Bell out the door. Lots of lost production, only returning two starters on the offensive line. Yeah, you've got some portal guys coming in, but where's the continuity here? I mean, this is a wholly revamped offense for the most part. And so my question is, are they going to have it all together when they go to play Georgia Tech? Georgia Tech is going to play them like it's the Super Bowl, man. I mean, it's they are going to spend a whole month just prepping for FSU.
And it's in
Um,
Ireland.
and, yeah, and legitimately, Georgia Tech is sneaky. They are. They are they are good enough to pull something out of their hat and potentially beat you week one if you don't bring your A game. If you're slow, you're out the gate, you could lose this game. So it's potentially trappy. Now, do I have FSU losing this game? No, I don't. But I could totally see it in the realm of possibility. And if that happens, this total is cooked immediately because FSU has a loss baked in this schedule. Now, out goes Jordan Travis, man. And DJU, I like DJU, but he's not a prolific guy. And what is one thing that made the FSU offense so dang good last year? Jordan Travis's feet, Shoob. Not only was he elusive and he improved as a passer, but he was just a true dual threat. He was making great decisions. And he's a true dual threat quarterback. DJU is no such person. DJU, I will give him credit where credit is 21 touchdowns, 7 picks. Ratios, ratios, ratios. Great job, DJU. And he did that at Oregon State. But man, Oregon State had a pretty dang good O-line, man. So we'll see how this works out. We'll see how it works out. I just gotta say, I think it's definitely going to be a step back on offense for FSU for the reasons I mentioned, but by the change in quarterback scheme, by the fact that, I mean, even at running back, you are losing a running back to the NFL as well, and you're bringing in a transfer. I mean, there's no way they don't take a step back on offense, Shub. No way. Now, off to defense. They also lost a ton of defensive players to the NFL. We forget how good this FSU team was last year. They lost 4 or 5 dudes just from that defense to the NFL last year. They lost Verse, they lost Fisk, they lost Green, they lost Jerry and Jones, they lost Tatum Bethune. That's 5 dudes that were drafted for FSU's defense last year. It's
Yep.
crazy to me. And yes, they were active in the portal. They brought in Marvin Jones, a really highly graded, highly touted guy from Georgia to play defensive end. They got some other guys in who could maybe provide some depth and fill in some holes. But ultimately, I think this defense is still taking a step backward from where it was last year, for sure. It's not to say that this defense will be bad. It's just not going to be what it was last year, which was 10th in defensive efficiency, by the way. And they were 29th in offensive efficiency. I think they take a step back in offensive efficiency. So we're not going to see the FSU that we saw last year, or at least that's how I feel. Now, Fentrell Cypress is coming back, but I mean, he was a little bit of disappointment after how hyped he was coming out of the transfer portal. So we'll see if he can get it back together. Otherwise, he would have left the NFL, mind you. He came back for a reason, guys. Don't get mad at me. But anyway, so for all these reasons, Shu, I'm sitting there and I'm seeing this line at 9.5, and I'm like, look, I mean, it could maybe FSU can put all these pieces together, and it could work out because Norvell is a great coach, and FSU clearly has something going on there. They did get a lot of really solid pieces in the portal, but at the same time, I look at the schedule, Shu. I see Georgia Tech trappy, but I have a dub. Boston College, no contest. I have that as a dub. Bye week, then you go play Norvell's old team, Memphis, dub. Then you've got Cal, dub. At SMU, I have as kind of a probable because SMU's got themselves a quarterback, man. And if your defense isn't ready for that game, SMU might bring it to you. I do have them winning that game, but still a probable one. Clemson, Shoob. This is where it gets real because Clemson's going to want back at FSU. Clemson wants to be the top dog on the block. We were just talking about this. I think Cade Klubnik improves a little bit. I think this is a mid-season right here. So by this point in time, we've already seen the emergence of those two aforementioned wide receivers that Clemson has, those true freshmen who I think can be absolutely game changers for them. And then Clemson's defense is probably going to take a step back, but they're still going to be pretty formidable. And if you don't have a quarterback that can run away from these big, bad defensive linemen that Clemson has, like a Jordan Travis, and you're stuck back there with DJU, mistakes can be made. I think they can lose that game, Shub. I know they're at home. I know it's in Tallahassee, but I would not be shocked if Clemson wins that game. And that's why that's one of those things where I said this can teeter in either direction.
I mean, Clemson had them
And
on
they
the
get
ropes last year. Remember, it went into double overtime, I
yeah,
believe, and that was last year's
exactly,
Clemson team. I mean,
exactly, man. So I have that as a probable, but I actually lean to Clemson winning that game this year, even though it's in tally. Bye week at Duke, probably a win. I mean, Duke is in shambles. At Miami, probable. We'll see. Miami, I mean, what kind of crystal ball are we going to get by this point in the season?
that's a
Where are
very
we
good
at?
question.
Exactly. So it's a probable, man. If Miami is actually having a good year, that could be a heck of a game. Then bye week, Charleston Southern, so extra bye week. And then they go and they play Florida. And this is where it gets interesting because Florida, by this point, we talk about quit alert all the time. Show Florida's schedule on the screen. Florida has the most unfair schedule in all of college sports. Anyone who can even go bowling from that schedule deserves a raise because that schedule is just ridiculous. Now, at the end of the day, this still is a rivalry, and I know there is some quit alert, but I mean, if your season's already like we can't make a bowl game, we can't do whatever. What if you have the potential to just ruin Florida State's season, completely ruin it? Might serve some motivation there. I'm going to go with this. I think Florida State's going to slip somewhere. I think they're going to lose to Clemson. I think they're going to possibly, and I completely skipped Notre Dame. How did I skip Notre Dame, Shub? How did I skip
Pretty
Notre
big
Dame?
one to skip.
That's a pretty big one to skip, and it's at Notre Dame too.
Yeah.
I think Notre Dame can beat this team as well. And then boom, right there, we're already at 10 wins. So find me one more in there, North Carolina, Miami, Florida, or maybe even SMU or this trappy Georgia Tech game. I just need one of those extra dominoes to fall, and it's an under. So it scares me, Shub. And then if DJU goes down, we're down to a true freshman quarterback, man. A true freshman quarterback as their backup. So there's just a lot of questions here. And that line being at 9.5 is so perfect because it can really teeter on either way. But because of the lack of mobility from DJU and how dynamic Jordan Travis was because of his mobility and his improved passing and those great wide receivers, I'm under, man. I think FSU is an under this year, under 9.5.
Under
Not to say that they
9.5
can't be a
wins.
good team. Not to say that they can't be a good team this year, but under 9.5 with a confidence score of 1.
1 point for confidence. All right. Man, it is fence riding season, but that's about what I expected for win totals, man. The sports books are good at this, man. They're good at pegging these lines, but yeah, I pretty much have to reiterate basically everything you said. I'm in complete agreement. The offense is going to take a step back. The receiver room, it's going to take a hit. I mean, the guys they lost are just too good. DJU, we've always liked DJU, but I mean, the guy's what in his fifth year of college football now. I kind of feel like what else is there
He
to
is
see
he is
from him,
what he is, man. And unless
Exactly.
Hakeem Williams, their stud 5-star wide receiver, just comes out and he's like the next, first round pick, next Travis Hunter or something. I mean, I just don't see FSU taking off like that.
Exactly. I think overall DJU is a mild downgrade at QB over Travis, but to be fair, DJU, if you look at his career progression, his numbers have gotten progressively better year over year, but we're getting to a certain point now. Even with Norvell, it's a great coaching staff. I mean, he played under at Oregon State and that great coaching staff, and he still, was what he was. So I think it is what it is, like you said. And then defense, same thing, man. I wrote down good job supplementing the losses, but it's still going to be an overall mild step back. I mean, there's only so much you can do, man. When you lose five draft picks, man, that was a good defense. That's had some good deep individual players last year. So as far as the schedule, man, the Shoob model is kind of down on FSU compared to the market, man. The Shoob model is FSU coming in at a crisp 8 wins on the dot. Only 8 wins. I was a little surprised by that, not gonna
It's
lie.
pretty heavy under for the shoe
It
model.
is a heavy under, but you know what? I was kind of surprised that the line was at 9.5 and plus even money on both sides. Like I thought the line. I don't know what we're missing here, man. I feel like they have confidence in Norvell as a coach, which I think is fair because Norvell's a great in-game coach. He's a great in-game coach.
He absolutely is.
And I feel like he'll steal you a game against a coach like Cristobal, where maybe Miami might have the better roster talent, but Norvell can outcoach somebody like Cristobal, who's going to automatically lose you a game just for being an
I
idiot,
mean, who knows, man?
every year.
Who knows? Maybe Miami's got them beat instead of kneeling it. They decide to run the ball, fumble it. FSU recovers it and wins the game.
Exactly. So
Georgia Tech.
yeah. Exactly. But with that being said, the shoe model is lower in Florida State. The shoe model has toss-ups at SMU, Clemson at Miami, and then it has Florida State as smaller favorites against Florida and a pretty decent underdog at Notre Dame. The model actually has Notre Dame as a 75% chance to win that game. It is in South Bend. The model is high on Notre Dame, but that's for a different day. So, like I was saying, man, 9.5 wins just seems high for what's an improved ACC overall. And what on both sides of the ball seems like, not major, but mild to moderate downgrades on both sides of the ball this year for Florida State. It's just not going to be the same team as it was last year. Like that team was really good. And it'll be a good team, but not an elite team like last year. And then the other question for me is, man, I mean, we all know what happened last year with the playoff snub and all that, but like, what's the messaging for Norvell this year? You had that happen to you. Like, how do you rebound? You get a whole basically new roster, a ton of turnover. Like, what's the messaging? It'll be interesting to watch. But I'm gonna go with under 9.5 wins. Surprise, surprise. But you know what? I'm gonna do something very crazy, and I'm gonna give this a medium confidence. I'm gonna give it a 2 confidence points. Now, I would give it a 3, a high confidence. The only reason I'm not is because Norvell is a damn good coach. So the only way that we're wrong about this is if Norvell just works his magic somehow and goes 10-2. I don't see that happening, but that's the only thing that's keeping me back from a 3. I'm gonna say medium confidence here, but I promise you I will have a high confidence before today's video is over. So we won't be we'll get out those threes.
Me too, by the way.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming
All
very
right.
soon.
How about Louisville, man? Speaking of Florida State's ACC opponent from last year in the title game, that was Louisville. Louisville, they proved us wrong. We all said 3 of us, even Gonzo last year. Remember, we were down on them. We said under 8 wins, and Louisville just shoved in our faces, man.
They had such
Uh,
a good schedule, man. So
we,
generous.
I don't know what we were thinking, man. I don't know what we were thinking. We gotta owe it back to the Louisville fans, bro. But I don't know. We'll see what happens this year with the line. It's sitting at 8.5 wins. I think definitely Jeff Brom is getting some respect from the sports books. But I mean, Louisville, you had a pretty good team last year, but they also have a bit of turnover, and it's an interesting team, man. And with that being said, what do you have on the Cardinals? The line's, like I say, 8.5. It's even money on both sides, so it's fair game here.
So this team's actually very interesting. And again, this team is a little bit hard to peg, but man, big game Brom, Jeff Brom, he has success wherever he goes, man. I love Jeff Brom. 30th in offensive efficiency last season. 18th in defensive efficiency. That's their bread and butter. Just a very well balanced team, Shub. Very well balanced. But I have to kind of bring something up here. Tyler Shook, I don't know if he's got an agent or whatever the case may be, but that dude's got like the best agent or representation in all of college sports because that dude has been the most mid quarterback his whole career and always goes to get a Power Five starting job wherever he transfers. And I'll tell
He's
you what, he hasn't.
Kirk Cousins light of college football. That's what he is.
But Kirk Cousins has actually had some good seasons.
Maybe that's a bad example, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
He
I
is
know
the
where you're trying to
definition
go
of
with
mid.
it.
He is the
Yeah,
definition of
okay.
mid, and
Oh,
he seems to cash it in wherever he's going.
dude, Tyler
Yeah,
Shook is the Daniel Jones. Like he
there
just
you go.
he like that contract Daniel Jones has got. But anyway, man, we'll see. I mean, when Tyler Shook is your quarterback, it's not a lot of confidence points that you're getting from me. And then I will say this: they also lost Jawar Jordan. They lost Isaac Guerendo, both really good running backs, both to the NFL, both got drafted because they were so solid. And then they bring in Miami transfer Donald Chaney to replace those guys, a far inferior running back to both those two. Downgrade the quarterback, downgrade the running back, lost Jamari Thrash at wide receiver, but silver lining, they get Colin Lacey from South Bama, who's a very, very good wide receiver, very underrated. I mean, that dude has NFL like potential. He's a very good player, and I'm happy to see him get a shot in the Power Five level or Power Four, I should say. And then they also got Ja'Cory Brooks, who had like a 600-yard season at Bama last year. Not so he didn't really play much, but before that he showed signs that he could play a little bit. So maybe they have some guys there that can supplement that loss of Jamari Thrash. But ultimately, man, if the quarterback can't get it to him, what does that mean? If the running back, can't create space, what does that mean for your offense? Only 2 of 5 returning starters on the offensive line, and then the rest are transfers. Now, it's hard to see how they're going to supplement that because, I mean, they have 31 people transferring in, 31. So maybe something works out. It's hard to really gauge what their offensive line is going to look like or how effective it's going to be. But, I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough. Then we look on the flip side. We look on the flip side to the defense. Louisville is very well coached, and I do expect them to still have a good defense. They keep Quincy Riley, who grades out very well in pass coverage. They bring in Corey Thornton from UCF, who actually grades really, really well too. So potentially, we're going to see some good players in coverage. And when they're well coached, that's also a big plus too. Go Jeff Braun, Team Braun, baby. They lost Tyler Barron to Miami, one of their highest rated defensive linemen, but ultimately they added some Harvard guy. This is crazy. Thank you, PFF, by the way, for giving us the data. I looked at this on the transfer portal and I said, Thor Griffith from Harvard. Who's this guy?
That's
Like
a
this is some
Harvard name
Viking
right
coming
there.
from Harvard.
That is a
Yeah,
Viking name right there.
legitimately. But apparently he grades pretty dang good as a D lineman and versus the run.
Big
So
game
this could
Brahms
be.
got a method to his madness, man.
I know. So this could be a very, very sneaky get right here, as he was only like a 3-star transfer. So there are some guys that stick out that don't really stick out for Louisville. So don't underestimate Jeff Brom is one thing that I've learned. And then they also return their defensive end, Ashton Gillette, who is an absolute beast. So, I mean, they've got players, man. They got players in their defense still. So they're still going to be very formidable on that side of the ball. My question is the offense, man. I know you got some receivers. What else do you got? Now, let's look at the schedule, Shoob. Austin P win, Jacksonville State win, bye week, Georgia Tech at home at least, but we know how Georgia Tech is. Georgia Tech's a team that can go off, compete with anyone, and lose to anyone. Probable. At Notre Dame, probably a loss, but I think they can keep that competitive. I'm going to say they lose that game in South Bend. Then we're going to play SMU. That's a probable because SMU's got a pretty dang good quarterback. We'll see how that one shakes out. At Virginia, win. Miami, probable. At Boston College, win. At Clemson, probable. Lean loss. It's at Clemson. Bye week to go at Stanford. And at Stanford could be very tricky, Shoob, because Stanford is one of those teams. I think they're well coached. We saw what they were able to do last year. They didn't do great, but they still exceeded expectations given what little they had.
Yeah,
so I think that's
we
a good
thought they were
coaching
gonna be
job.
like awful. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so that's a
absolutely.
good coaching job. It speaks to that. And so I think Stanford could be a little bit sneaky and steal some of these wins because people look at Stanford on the schedule and a lot of people, at sports books, wherever, and thinking, oh, that's definitely a loss, or that's definitely a loss for Stanford. They're definitely going to win that. Stanford was awful last year. Not so fast. I think Stanford could be poised. So we'll see, man. Pitt probably win, and then at Kentucky, probable, but it's at Kentucky, man. Snake oil showdown could be a
Yeah.
loss.
Don't get caught in that trap, man, like you did last year with the Snake Oil Showdown.
Yeah, that got me, man. But either way, sitting there at 8.5, it's so hard. But I'm gonna lean under, man. I'm gonna lean to 8 wins, 8-4. But 8 to 9, it's not money I would bet, man, because 8 to 9 seems
No.
so perfect for this. But it's because of my lack of faith in the quarterback situation and the tremendous step back in the running back situation that really brings cause for concern for Louisville. They still have solid players on that team. They can still be a very formidable team, but ultimately, I think that step back on the offense is going to be a lot to overcome. I lean 8 instead of 9. Confidence, 1 point.
I think I already filled in the one confidence point. I knew that was happening, but hey, man, I am in the same exact boat, unfortunately. And Louisville fans, I'm sorry we're doing it to you again. We are fading Louisville, and you know what? This is why we have confidence points this year because we're not confident in this because I don't like fading Jeff Brom. He's a great coach, but
He
you
is a
know
great
what?
coach. That's why it's 1 point of confidence.
But
If it
I have,
wasn't Jeff Brom,
yeah.
I'd feel much more confident.
Exactly. And it is I do not like fading great coaches, but there is reason for this, as you very eloquently stated, man, Tyler Shuck. This is his seventh season playing college football. Seventh, not sixth, his seventh season, dude. Like seventh year in college football. Come on, bro. He's got to be like what,
Like
24, 25?
seriously, like Brom, you're telling me you couldn't get anyone better in the portal?
I mean,
Anyone better than Tyler Shuck?
so I mean it's not like he's bad. He's just mid, like we said. But here's the thing. In Tyler Shuck's six previous seasons playing college football, he has not played a single season of more than 7 games in any year. Think about that. He has not
Yeah, he's,
started
he's
over
the
seven
glass
games.
man.
He is the glass man. He gets hurt every time. And if you look at what's underneath him, because if you're doing win totals, and we've done this long enough, you know what you're doing. In a situation like this, you got to look at the backup quarterbacks because there's a pretty good likelihood
It's a
that they're
true
going to
a true
play.
freshman projected to be a backup, the backup.
Yeah,
Watch
Pierce
this happen, Shube.
Clarkson.
Watch this happen. Shug goes down. True freshman comes in and he plays like a first round pick the whole season. Louisville goes 10 or 11, 10-2, 11-1, and then we're sitting there like, Brom, you bastard, you did it to us again.
Well, that's probably what will happen. But Pierce Clarkson's a redshirt freshman, by the way. But I see what you mean. I think he was a low rated 4 star, something like that. He was like a high three, low 4 star rated recruit. But anyways, you got him, and you also have Harrison Bailey, redshirt senior in the mix. But Harrison Bailey's, he's extremely mid. He's below mid. So if I look at this quarterback room, and I agree with you, man, any of these guys, I don't have high confidence in making it through a season, let alone being great starters throughout the season. But it's Jeff Brom. It's Jeff Brom, man. He's going to figure out a way to get the most out of that talent. And as far as the defense, man, I think you are underlooking the defense just a tad because they do have 9 out of 11 starters returning. This defense has upside to be inside the top 10 this year, I think. I think the defense can be very, very good. So I think it could be inside the top 10, maybe conservatively, probably a top 15 unit this year. I think the defense, for all the questions we have offensively, the defense is what's going to carry this team to a 9-win season or maybe a 10-win season. Best case scenario, if they get there, it'll be because of that side of the ball. The Shoob model has Louisville at 7.9 wins. So the Shoob model has a hair to the under here, and it has Louisville underdogs at Notre Dame, at Clemson. I got toss-ups versus SMU, Miami, and at Kentucky. And here's the thing, man. The one thing about this schedule, when you break it down, and I was looking for just little reasons here or there to lean under, lean over. Well, I'm already leaning under because the model's telling me so. But also, you look at that stretch there. They got 7 games in a row without a bye week. Now, again, everyone gets 2 byes this year. Louisville has an early bye, and they got to play 7 in a row. And in that 7 game stretch, a very dangerous Georgia Tech team at Notre Dame, a dangerous SMU team. Miami, at BC, at Clemson. That's a tough middle stretch there on that schedule. There probably is at least a couple losses baked in there, maybe minimally even one. But even so, that's just a rough stretch there, and I don't like the scheduling dynamics here. And you look at Louisville last year, man, they went 4-1 in one possession games. The team was definitely not as good as their record showed. They also did play a very light schedule last year. I mean, we all know this. I just think it's gonna bounce the other side here, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna lean under, but because it is Jeff Brom, I am just going one confidence point. I same exact reasoning as you, man. If it was not Brom, if it was just some other random coach, I'd probably have like two or three confidence points here. But if he does it to us again, if they win 9 games, like I'll just stop. I'm just gonna tip my cap and be like, all right, I'm done. I'm done fading you, man.
Yeah, that's
Like
why I
Lane
brought that
Kiffin.
hypothetical, man.
I've already hit that stage with Lane Kiffin. I think we faded Lane Kiffin the last 3 years in a row, and Ole Miss has hit the over every single time. So I'm like, all right, man, you're a good coach. Like I'm done. I'm gonna stop. Like, but I'll give Brom one more year, and if you prove me wrong, I will stop. Enough said. All right. Moving on to NC State, also with a win total of 8.5 wins. And this win total, man, on Caesars is juiced pretty heavily to the over at -150 to the over, +120 to the under. So this one's been hit. And when I first looked at this, it was even money not too long ago. So there's been some money coming in on NC State over 8.5 wins. I wonder if that's a little foreshadowing here to our analysis. So take it away, man. Take it away on the Wolfpack.
NC State, great coach team, man. I love them so much. I mean, what held them back last year? Their offense, 75th in offensive efficiency. Brennan Armstrong was not the answer. And they thought maybe with Robert and I coming back, Brennan Armstrong, they could, revitalize his one good year at Virginia, but that was not to be had. 17th in defensive efficiency, man. This is what the bread and butter of NC State football is: defense and just pure heart and determination, man. Let's get to the quarterback situation, Shoob. Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall was supposed to be in the portal a year ago, but couldn't because he couldn't transfer his degree, and he's supposedly supposed to go to Auburn. But now, man, if you're an NC State fan, aren't you happy that you get to get away from this abomination that was the Brennan Armstrong experiment gone rogue? And now
Man,
you're
you don't
over
like
here with
Brandon
Grayson
Armstrong, man.
McCall. He's not a very good player, man. He was being overhyped. But and I'm taking my victory lap on that one because that's what I said. But anyway, so we've got Grayson McCall, man, coming in. Let's just look at this. And then you've got a running back, Jordan Waters from Duke, who's bringing 800 yards and 12 touchdowns to the table because, Duke just imploded after, Elko left. So now you've got two improvements at two key offensive positions. And then I'll raise it. Wide receiver improvement. You're getting Noah Rogers from Ohio State, who was highly touted. And that's not really someone that NC State gets, a caliber of athlete like that. So NC State doesn't get those guys. And then you return Kevin Concepcion, true freshman, 71 catches, 800 yards, 10 touchdowns as a true freshman. I mean, you've already got an improved wide receiver core. And then you bring in, under the radar, Justin Jolly from UConn, a very solid tight end who had 500 yards receiving, which for a tight end at the college level is very good. So, I mean, they have already improved immensely on the offensive side of the ball. So we could see that 75th efficiency rating catapult, man. I can see that going to the top 35. And that is what is needed for NC State to make this leap and potentially snipe the ACC this year, man. They are going to be a formidable, formidable team. Now, look, only 2 of 5 of their offensive line starters are coming back. So there is potential for there to be some regression in the O-line, but overall, I think it's still going to be a respectable unit. But let's look to the defensive side. They lose the heart and soul of the defense in Peyton Wilson. It is a loss, but look, man, if we learned anything from NC State, kind of like Louisville, they bring good defenses to the table. That's
You got a
one thing that they
linebacker
do.
factory there, man.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I also want to add this. NC State is really good at developing their players. And I will say this. They bring Jahad Carter from Ohio State. They bring in Donovan Kaufman from Auburn, two guys who were highly rated out of high school. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jahad Carter came from Syracuse in a transfer, or I think it was Syracuse to Ohio State because he was highly touted and then just didn't work out. But now he's being redirected. But if anyone can develop these highly touted guys who had success in the past, who have the athleticism, and can turn them into a really good safety, or at least a really good college safety, it's going to be NC State, man. They're one of those programs that can develop their players on the defensive side of the ball. And I tip my cap to them, a lot of respect for them. And that's part of why I really like what I see with NC State this year. The offensive improvements, the amazing coaching. I mean, Dave Doran is a fantastic coach, man. Even to the point here, I like the improvements so much so that I'm going to go through the schedule and I'm going to maybe raise an eyebrow. So, Western Carolina, week 1, that's a clear win. Week 2, Tennessee. I think they win that game. I think they beat Tennessee in week 2.
All right. I'm here for it, man. June 23rd, 2024. NC State's beating Tennessee. You heard it here first.
I have it as a probable, but I have it as a lean win. Then they go to La Tech, win. At Clemson, we already talked about the Shoob. I think if they don't beat Tennessee, they beat Clemson, but they could even come out 4-0. I think minimally they're coming out of that first 4 games 3-1.
Absolutely.
Minimally. Then they've got NIU, that's a win. Syracuse, that's a win. Cal, that's a win. Bye week to prepare for that sneaky Stanford team, who I think is kind of like the Georgia Tech of the West here, with how sneaky they are. Win. Duke, win. Bye week at the sneaky. Look, they get their bye week before all the sneaky teams. Stanford and Georgia Tech, man. They're poised for a really good schedule draw here as well. And then you go at North Carolina, which is going to be a probable because that one is just a rivalry. You're telling me that 8.5 is my line here, and I could even be wrong about Tennessee and Clemson and still have a game to spare? Brother, I'm going over.
Let's
Are you
go.
kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is a confidence level of 3, Shoob. 9-3 is like the worst case scenario, and that's still over. They say they lose to Tennessee, say they lose to Clemson. Where else are they going to lose on here? Okay, if you lose to North Carolina, cool. You're still 9-3. You're not going to lose every single one of these games where it's going to come down to one score. No, sir. The only way that I'm wrong about this, and knock on wood, this is if Grayson McCall goes down. If Grayson McCall can stay healthy, they're set, man. This is an overplay all day.
Over all day. Xan is howling with the Wolfpack here to 9 wins minimally. So, yeah, I'm going to be howling too, man. I'm over. I'm over on NC State, and I'm assigning 3 confidence points as well. I already threw it up on the board. Yeah, man, I like this team a lot. I love what's coming back. And what you mentioned about Dave Doran last year, the offense wasn't really that great, 75th overall in offensive efficiency in the country. They still went 9-4. Like they went 9-4. A very, very quiet 9-4 last year. I think NC State kind of flew under the radar last year.
Very well coached, man.
They are a very well coached team, and that's thanks to Dave Doran. Yeah, man, I reiterate absolutely everything. I think there's just a huge, big case for improvement here overall offensively. And I'll even make the case. I think even if you don't get a Grayson McCall rebirth, even if Grayson McCall does kind of flop, I still like the offense a lot. I still like that the offense can
And he
still
can't be
improve.
worse than Brennan Armstrong.
Yeah, exactly. I think that McCall, when you look at his numbers last year, he had a down season, and that was mainly in part because I think a big change in coaching staff. Jamie Chadwell was a huge reason why McCall had a lot of his success in that system.
Likely was gone. I mean, he lost a lot of his best players too. So
Exactly. So that I saw that coming. So you're looking at Grayson McCall, and you're like, all right, are we going to get 2023 Grayson McCall, or are we going to get 2020 through 2022 Grayson McCall? And I'm thinking probably somewhere in the middle,
and even
even
if you
if
get
it's
that, that's really good.
Exactly. And even if you get it teetering more towards last year's version of Grayson McCall, I think you're still pretty happy with the offense and you're still pretty much banking on an offensive improvement here. Offensive line will be better. I think it's a guarantee the offensive line is going to be get better, man. 4 out of 5 starters return. I like them a lot. Love the skill position players. You already went into detail about that. I think the only concern here offensively is maybe if there was to be a McCall injury, I don't like the depth behind him at quarterback. I wish that NC State still had MJ Morris. If they didn't let MJ Morris go away to Maryland, I think that this would be just an over the moon overplay here. But again, I think the offense is poised for an improvement into the top 50 minimally. I know you said top 35. I think we could see that. And the defense, man, gosh, the defense, the secondary is going to be nasty. I mean, the secondary is going to be nasty. The D line is going to improve in the linebacker room, even losing Peyton Wilson. It should still be very decent. I mean, this is a good team, man. This is a good team. The Shoob model has NC State at 8.4 wins, but I think there's upside for more, man. So the 8.4, that's a very hair lean to the under, but I'm overriding the model, man. I see so much upside here. I have NC State favored in 10 out of 12 games. The only games I don't have them favored in is at Clemson and against Tennessee, which is on a neutral field, but I don't have them as a big underdog to Tennessee. And pretty much every other game, is either a toss-up or I have them favored in. And I'm with you, man. You just look at the schedule, and I like the way that it sets up. The buys are late in the year, which is good for health. I like that their buys are October and in November. And you already highlighted it, man. The snakes in the grass teams like Stanford and Georgia Tech, they have time to prepare for them. So hopefully you don't get bit there. And I look at North Carolina at the end of the year, games like that, man. Mac Brown could be way out the door by then. That team could be on quit alert. Like I love the way the schedule sets up. I like that their tougher games are earlier on in the year. And then the rest of the schedule outside of that Clemson game, those final 8 games, I mean, we could be looking at an 8-0. Even if we don't get 8-0, even if we get 7-1, and you already have losses to Tennessee and Clemson, you already mentioned it. Nine and
Nine
three,
three.
that's an over.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah, I love this play, and there's a reason why it's juiced to the over. There's been money coming in on it, so the secret is out, I think. So I would bet this. I did not play this on Caesars, but I did get this at minus 125 on DK. I literally put personal money on it today after doing this research. So yeah, I would put personal money on this one. This is my favorite bet of this video for sure, is the NC State over 8.5. I got it at minus 125, but for the sake of consistency, we'll play the Caesars line here for win totals purposes for the podcast. So you and I both confidence points of 3+ on the over. We're howling, baby. We're howling with the pack. We
Yes,
got the
sir.
hots. We got the
Woof,
hots
woof.
for NC State this year, man. I love it. All right. Last but certainly not least, well, it's kind of debatable whether they're least, at least for this batch of teams. Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest, man, it's a good program, and Dave Clawson is a great coach. There's a lot of good coaches in this division, and that's predominantly why a lot of the teams here, the former Atlantic Division teams, have been the better half of the ACC over the last, decade or so, because there's a lot of good coaches in this conglomerate of teams. But Dave Clawson kind of had a down year last year with Wake Forest. Of course, losing Sam Hartman at quarterback to Notre Dame last year, that was a huge hit. And the team just did not seem to really recover that well. They went 4-8, 1-7 in conference play. And now they're sitting with a win total of 5 wins, but there's a little bit of juice to the under at minus 135. So things certainly aren't trending the best way at Wake Forest right now. But is there a bounce back season in store for the Demon Deacons? What do you think, Sam?
Uh, you got to look at your competition, man, and it it's looking better. Like you said, the ACC looks like it's going to be a little bit better this year. One of the better years that we're going to see from the ACC in a long time, considering that the conference has been down for basically 10 years. But hey, 84th in offensive efficiency last year, 70th in defensive efficiency. That is the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. That is not very good. Now, goodbye, Shoob savior Mitch Griffiths, and
We
welcome
need to talk
in.
about that.
You can watch last year's win totals if you want to know what we mean by that, but we'll leave it at that. And welcome in Hank Bachmeier from Louisiana Tech. 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I mean, okay ratio, but not a lot of production. 2,000 yards. I mean, that that's not very exciting for
That's
me.
such a that's such a random number generator transfer right there. Like Hank Bachmeier, like going from. I'm sorry, I just gotta point that out. Like that is the most like one of the most random quarterback transfer locations that you could possibly like match between two, like a quarterback and
Yeah,
just a team.
I think
It's
I think Clausen, man, he was like, "Oh man, Griffiths was the best I had, and like no one else wants to come here. Hey Hank, what are you doing, man?" Like,
oh, it's funny.
so I mean, and then look, I mean, Ellison transferred out. Yeah, you're bringing back Claiborne, who had 500 yards rushing, but I mean, only on four yards a pop, which is just not efficient. Which I mean, like if you do the math, you run it every time, that's a first down. But let's be real, it's not that efficient in the grand scheme of things. And then your best receiver is Taylor Morin. He returns. Actually, Donovan Green is your best receiver. He returns also. So that's the one thing I will say about the Demon Deacons. They return two 600-yard receivers. There's at least some production there. But God, man, like who's going to throw them the ball? Who's going to be able to run the ball here? There's some experience on this offensive line at least, but I don't expect it to be really all that great. I really expect this to be a very mid at best offensive line. I will say the big thing, and this is a red flag for me when it comes to Wake Forest, is that they lost a decent number of guys. No major guys in the transfer portal, but a lot of guys to where it makes you worry about depth. And sure, could they supplement people? Sure, they could, but they didn't. They only brought in 5 transfers, Shub. 5 total transfers, and I believe 15 transferred out. So, numbers game here, you're losing the numbers game. In addition to losing the numbers game, you lose an NFL corner in Kalen Carson, and you lose an NFL safety in Malik Mustafa. You literally lost 2 guys who got drafted out of your secondary. So now the only person that you brought in to supplement is a safety by the name of Capone Blue from Kent State, who doesn't grade at all, doesn't on PFF, and means he didn't get enough snaps, and who doesn't have a high transfer portal rating. So that leaves me a lot to be desired when it comes to production in the secondary. Now, they did get a linebacker from SIU in Brandon Combs, who grades really well against the pass, but one linebacker is not going to make or break the entire defense here. The only thing I could say positive about this Wake Forest defense is that the defensive line has some good returners who are very solid. Bryce Ganius, he's back. Jasheen Davis, probably their best defensive lineman, is back. So it's not all doom and gloom, but man, any team that they play who has a remotely decent quarterback is going to eat this secondary alive, man. They just know, man, this is not going to be a good team this year. Wake Forest fans, you had the 70th most efficient defense last year. Keep in mind that you still have these good defensive linemen, but you also had 2 NFL defensive backs and you're 70th. Take that away. Don't replace it. Where do you think that's going to get you? It's going to be a tough season for the Demon Deacons. Let's look at the schedule, man. North Carolina A&T. We're going to start with the dub, baby, because that's what we do. North Carolina, A&T, no match for the Demon Deacons. Then we're going to go to Virginia. Well, we're going to stay at home against Virginia. And that's a probable. I can't even if I'm saying Virginia is a probable for you, we've got a problem. That's what I think about Wake Forest, Shub. That's what I think about Wake Forest. Ole Miss is clearly an L. Land chart coming, baby. You're done. No chance. Bye week to UL Lafayette. You might still lose that game. Probable, man. I think UL Lafayette might beat them.
Hey man,
Legitimately.
I think we're off to a 3-1 start here. Let's I think 3-1 start. I think
Maybe 2-2, but even at NC State, L, Clemson, L, at UConn, they could probably win that, but probable. Still probable. I can't
UConn's gonna be
guarantee
terrible.
it. I don't know, man. Wake Forest is gonna be pretty bad. But anyway, at Stanford, I've got them losing to Stanford, man. Then bye week, I've got them losing to Cal. Then I've got them losing to North Carolina. Then I've got them losing to Miami. And then I have Duke as a probable. I'm going under 5, Shoob. And I'm going to give this a confidence level of 3.
Oh,
I would be
wow.
shocked if this team wins more than 5 games. Absolutely shocked if they go bowling.
Wow. Okay. Well, my friends, do I have a bone to pick with you? I think we're at war now. It's going to be a confidence points class of 5 because I'm going 2 confidence points to the over here. Medium confidence, not high confidence, medium confidence to the over. So I'm gonna go to bat here for Dave Clawson's team just a little bit. Now, I do mostly agree with you that it's not this is a low bar here. We're talking about 5 wins as the win total. A team that went 4-8 last year. But I look at the offense, man, and the offense was pretty poor last year. And I just look at what they got back and everything that, the losses they took, but the guys that they have coming in, knowing that Clawson is still a pretty good coach, in my opinion. It's hard to see much upside for this offense, but I also don't see a lot of downside either. So that's the thing. I don't see a lot of downside, but I don't see a lot of upside. So I feel like the offense, even with all the churn and burn, probably is going to stay in the same neighborhood as it was, which isn't great. And as far as the defense, man, I don't know. I looked into this defense a little bit, and I think you can make a case here. I think this unit could take a step forward into the top 50 if things went well. I think it's quietly decent. They have decent but not great experience returning, in my opinion, especially the defensive line, which I think is a big piece there that they got
D line
experience
is their
returning.
strength. Their secondary is where I have a bone to pick with them because they were already the 70th most efficient defense.
Yes, and the secondary is going to be a weakness, but I look at a lot of the teams on the schedule, man. I don't see a lot of teams that could necessarily take advantage of that. I think that there is a pathway to a bowl game on here, and my model has them at 5.7 wins. 5.7. So this is the first team today in this video that the model has higher than the actual win total. And so I kind of had to defer to the model here. I think it's given Dave Clawson a little nod of confidence here. He's just a good coach. I think that Wake Forest is in store for a little bit of a bounce back season. I just don't think that this team will be quite as bad as it was last year, but I'm not expecting a whole lot. And one thing too, Xan, one of the reasons why I bumped a little confidence points here up to 2 is because you got the 5 even on the win total. So you got the push insurance. So that's why I was like, all right, I'm comfortable here. If it was 5.5, no, I would not be putting up 2 confidence points. I'd be putting up 1 and fence
That's why I'm
riding.
putting up 3 in the opposite direction because I think it's
No.
more likely that they win 4 than they win 6,
And that's
if
fair.
not
So
push.
luckily we have push insurance here, so that's why we're bumping the confidence points up. But anyways, my model has them obviously winning against NCAA. I have them in toss-up games against UVA, at Stanford, Cal, Duke, and then maybe at UNC because even though the model has UNC favored, that game's at the end of the year. And like I said, all these teams that played North Carolina late could be a quit alert team. I think that I would also label that a toss up if I was reading between the lines. So if you look at this schedule here, I got 5 toss up games. 3 out of those 5 are at home, which I like. I think that's a little bump of confidence towards Wake Forest. And then on top of that, I already have them favored against NCAA at UConn. I think UConn's going to be one of the worst FBS teams this year. And then Louisiana Lafayette, I think they will be a favorite against them. So I'm looking at 3 wins in the bag, and out of those 5 toss-ups, can you win me 2 or 3 of those? I think it's certainly possible. A lot of those are at home. I think the defense can be the main driver to getting the Deacons to a bowl game here. So I'm going to go 2 confidence points to the over. I am not going to fade Dave Clawson this time around. I'm going to give him a vote of confidence. So there we go, man. There's our first disagreement. This will be our first win totals war of 2024. So we can watch the Demon Deacons in close with a close eye here as we battle for supremacy in the point column this season.
If
Which, by the way,
NCAA wins that first game, man, I'm gonna
oh,
I'm
it's
gonna
toast.
laugh my ass off.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit of disagreement towards the end, but you know what, man? I think the big takeaway from this video is that a lot of the good teams in this division, it's hard for us to put a peg on because the ACC is going to be a little bit better this year, and we're going to find that out. We're going to do some of that analysis in these next couple videos. Next videos in particular, there's a few teams on there that I am very excited to talk about. They'll be in the mix for the conference championship, and if you haven't run to the window to bet NC State over 8.5 wins, then get on it because we like it a lot. I just bet my personal money on it. So, Xan, without further ado, welcome back. 2024 win totals. It's good to be back and back on the grind. And we'll have some more ACC content coming out in a few days.
Saturday scholars on the mic, breaking it down so right. Their analysis hits the target, prediction accuracy so razor tight. Bank account on the rise with each winning call. Not here for hot takes, just the facts, that's all. Get it out, shooting snacks and zany bars, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday scholars, anthem standing tall and tall. Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back. The Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back. Oh, standing tall and tall. Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back.